Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
I'm a guy, which is why this is more funny to me that this happened rather than I'm scared for my life. But it's still creepy. I was at the flea market by the end of Walmart when a guy who was around like 50, kind of overweight, and had dark gray hair. He first encountered me when we were towards the front of the store. I'm not a social person, so when he greeted himself to me randomly, I thought that it was quite weird. I also thought that the way he was looking at me was weird. Around 10 to 15 minutes later in the store, the man came up to me again and said, "I'm new here. Do you know where the bathroom is?" And I thought that this was super weird, considering he walked past many people to say this to. And I said something like, "Well, I haven't been here before, so I don't know. I think it's over there." And then he walked away. I'm very judgmental to people and even told myself that maybe I was just looking into it too much. But I knew to keep my distance from this guy. At this point, I was almost done in the store and I didn't see him again until I got into my car. He must have been watching because where he was at in the store for him to walk out was the complete opposite side, and he walked out like 20 seconds after me. He's staring at me the entire time that he walked out, and then he waved, and at this point, I thought he was an undercover cop trying to keep an eye on me the way that he was looking at me the entire time. So, as I am pulling off, he is still staring at me in the middle of the parking lot, and I look in my side mirror. But he's standing there, staring and sucking on his index finger and waving me to come back. I wish I would have recorded him or gone back to see who he was, but I was just too in shock, and I just drove off. Should I report this to the store? Or what should happen? Honestly, I feel like people need to be aware of this guy. This happened when I was about 12 or 13. For important context, I live in an apartment complex that was 2 sets of rows, and each row with 4 apartments, and I lived in the apartment closest to the street of one row, and I had 2 cousins that live in the apartment at the very end of the row in the back. I would hang out with them just about daily. We were very into soccer at that time, and we would walk to a park about 4 or 5 streets away along with some of the neighborhood kids and play soccer there. Now, I say neighborhood kids, but it was a big group of about 15 kids in total, and the ages ranged from about 10 years old all the way to 17. One of my 2 cousins was the 17-year-old, which is why my parents allowed me to go without their supervision. So, on this day, like usual, we made our way to the park. Some of us would walk, some would ride scooters or skateboards, and I had my bike that day. We get to the park and we start playing. About halfway through our game, my parents drive by and they call to me from our car. They tell me that they are going to the store and to wait at the park for them. Okay, no big deal. I figure that they must want to go somewhere else afterwards, and it's easier to pick me up from the park than for me to wait back at the house. Of course, this doesn't make sense because it's a 4-street distance, but at that time, to my 12-year-old mind, it was perfectly logical. We keep playing for about another hour. Then as we get closer to sunset, more and more kids started making their way back to their house. When my cousins wanted to leave, they asked me if I was ready, and I said that my parents told me to wait for them here, so they left and I stayed behind. Eventually, it was just me. No big deal. I'm familiar with the neighborhood and I have my bike and the energy of a 12-year-old. So I start riding my bike up and down the street, just killing time. At this point, it hasn't occurred to me that if my parents wanted me to wait for them at the park, they wouldn't want me to wait past sunset. Eventually, I get impatient and hungry, but not wanting to get grounded for disobeying my parents, I just kept waiting. Except, instead of waiting at the park, I crossed the street and I was waiting there. After a few minutes, a car drove up and stopped next to me. It's nothing scary yet. There's a stop sign there, so I don't really pay it much mind. Except when it drove away, I realized that the car looked weird. It was old and boxy, like an 80s car. But what stood out was that it looked spray-painted gray. It was definitely not real car paint or done by a professional. I don't know if someone who stole a car would be dumb enough to draw that much attention to it, or if the look was intentional, but you could tell that it was just spray-painted all over. Anyway, it drove away and I kept waiting, annoyed now. But then, the car comes back from the other side of the street. I noticed it because it was hard to ignore at that point, but my survival instincts are still not kicking in. Maybe they were lost or just wanted to turn around without doing a U-turn. And since the park is a big square, going around it and coming back is easy enough to do. A few minutes go by, and they drive up again, and they stop at the stop sign. This time, I am starting to get nervous, so I look at the car. There are two men inside, very scruffy looking, unkempt beards, unkempt hair, dirty faces, stains on their shirts. And they look at me. They both smile at the same time, and they look at each other, smile even bigger, in the creepiest smile that I have ever seen someone do to this day. And then they drove away. Their smile creeped me out so much that I was now on high alert. In particular, I was watching the other side of the park where they would come from if they went around again like they did the first time. And sure enough, they did. This also means that they were now on the same side of the street as me. So, as soon as I saw the car, I jumped on my bike and I rode as fast as I humanly could. I could hear one yelling something, but I honestly don't know what it was, and I was too busy riding for my life. I could hear the car catching up, but I was too scared to even turn around, and I somehow made it to my street and ran into the building, but I didn't want them seeing where I lived, since my apartment would have been the one visible from the street. So, I went to the back behind my cousin's apartment, and then I hid there. My reasoning was, if they followed me inside the building, they would see me knocking on their door and get me before anyone answered. Worth noting, if it wasn't obvious, this was before cell phones. I waited for what felt like a few hours, but it was probably only 20 minutes or so before I got enough courage to make the short walk down the row of apartments to mine, and I tried the door. It was unlocked, so I went inside, and my parents were there, sitting on the couch watching TV, and they asked me how our game was, completely nonchalantly, and I questioned them and asked them why they didn't pick me up. They both looked confused. They asked me why they would tell me to wait there instead of home when it's a 4-street difference, and that I had my bike with me. And once they said that, it did make more sense. But to this day, I swear that they told me to wait there for them. They explained that when they drove up, they told me that they were going to leave the door unlocked for me in case I got home before they did. In my excitement of the game, I must have just completely misheard them. I simply went to my room after that, never telling them about it, because I'm a dumb kid. I knew that if I said something, they wouldn't let me go play soccer anymore, and that was clearly more important than my physical well-being. I never saw those guys or that car ever again. I look back on it now, and it doesn't matter how fast I was pedaling my bike. They were in a car. They should have and could have caught up if they wanted to. So, I don't know what their intentions were. If they were just having a laugh at my expense, if they were trying to scare me, or if they actually had something darker in mind. But I do think back on that day now, and I get chills every time that I realize how much different my life would be right now if they had caught me. So, to the two creepy men in the spray-painted car, let's not meet again. So, I always take the same train to work. It's a 30 to 45-minute ride, and I started to notice this one man that is always there in the morning. I don't know if it's just in my head or this man is a real creep. I noticed him around 2 to 3 months ago. At first, I didn't think much of it. I always thought that he was just annoyed that I always put my bag next to me and put my feet on this little thing next to the seat. But pretty soon, I knew it was something else. He was always staring at me when I enter the train, and he follows me with his eyes when I sit down. And then, he just continues to stare at me the whole time. I always look away from him because it's just weird, you know? He gets off at the same station as I do and stands directly behind me when I stand in front of the door, and it's really starting to freak me out. He never drives home with me, and I'm glad. But last week, my colleagues and I went out to eat, so I took the very last train. And guess who was at the main train station? Yes, him. He stood a few feet from me, but he didn't look away from me for like 20 minutes. We were alone in that time, but after those 20 minutes, more people came and he went away from me and didn't look at me. I always think about what would have happened if the people didn't show up. As the train arrived and we got in, he walked in the same direction as me and sat down a few seats in front of me to face me. You have to know that he is maybe in his 60s and I'm not even 20, so that makes it even more disgusting. I don't know what to do about it. He continues to stare at me and stands directly behind me in the morning, and it really creeps me out and makes me uncomfortable. I'm scared that I'm eventually alone with him in the train, and if he would do something. Update. It turned out that this man was in prison for sexual assault, and the police were called a few times after he got out. I talked to the police and showed them a picture of the man, and after that, I haven't seen him in my train anymore. So, I guess I got lucky that I was never alone with him. So, I'm pretty sure that I'm overreacting when I think about it, but just in case, I'm sharing it here. Background info. I'm a 15-year-old girl, and the man in this situation was, from my view, a middle-aged Middle Eastern man. Exactly 1 week ago, I was in Sydney for the holidays, and it was my first time in the city. It was around 11 a.m., and I was walking by myself around Hyde Park, and I was tearing up. I got in a fight earlier with my mom, so I ran off trying to find a secluded area. I was kind of doing that thing where you walk fast and you try not to cry. I was walking on a street where the bus stations are, and then this man stopped me and asked if he could take my picture. At first, I was skeptical, of course. I thought that it was a scam where he would ask for money for the pics, or he was gonna do something. I was caught off guard in the moment because I was in distress, so I just stood there and I said nothing with an unsure face. But then, he whipped out his iPad and then showed me his profile on the site called Flickr. I've now searched it up and it's a photography website, so I feel kinda bad now. I saw pictures of girls smiling, and the background in the pics were the park, I think, so I felt less cautious and I asked him, "In this park, right?" And then he responded that it will just take 10 to 15 minutes and that we would go and find somewhere to take the picture. I thought about it for like 5 seconds and I ended up saying no because I wasn't in the right state of mind, and even if I was, I would have said no. But then he kept trying to say that it would only take 10 to 15 minutes and that we should go, but I just said no and I walked away. I still feel kinda bad about the whole thing because his reaction after was a kind but disappointed smile. But now that I think about it, I don't think he even had a camera. Maybe he did, but I don't remember. I was overwhelmed, and immediately after, I went into the park and I found an empty space on the grass and I started bawling. I told my family, and of course, they all agreed that he had bad intentions. But I'm still really unsure about how I feel about the whole thing. What if that was an actual job? I don't think he picked me because he thought that I was a tourist or a minor, because I've gotten hit on by older guys, and some people think that I'm older than I actually am, which I can see. The fact that I was visibly vulnerable from being on the verge of breaking down, and the guy still tried to convince and talk to me, gives me the doubts, but who knows? Stuff like this has been happening to me a lot recently. I constantly get stares from people. Most are men who just act so weird around me. They either go quiet when I'm near them, or some of them try something like trying to start a conversation with me or say stuff at me. This is making me really paranoid of everyone around me, and just after all the weird encounters that have happened to me, I'm scared to go out by myself. And even when I go out with my mom, sometimes weird stuff still happens, and I just don't know what to do. I met a guy in college, and I ran one lap with him. He asked my name and I told him, and he was hitting on me, but I said no. Anyway, I was going through my emails a day later, and he sent me a schedule of when we will run together. I was shocked because to find my email in the college email system, he had to have gone through everyone who has my first name in the system. He would watch me so intensely whenever I ran or shot basketballs at the rec center. It was so intense that people actually noticed and told me. He would hide behind equipment and stare. That part was a little funny to me, at least. His hiding was terrible. He kept hitting on me in person and wouldn't take no for an answer. He grabbed me by the arm forcefully on one occasion, and another said that he was my boyfriend, which was obviously not. It's funny because I told my best friend and she didn't think anything of it. But one day, my best friend, we went to the same college. She then texts me and says to come to the dining hall, and I did. There was another girl, and I found out that this guy had a restraining order placed against him by the entire girls' soccer team. The restraining order was because he would use the same tactics against them. There is more that happened, but I'll stop it there. Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone who is truly crazy? Not someone who just does off-the-wall things or acts different, but genuinely insane. I have, and it terrified me. Let me back up. I will be vague on many details for obvious reasons, but a backstory is absolutely necessary. I work for a large corporation and I have a couple of different bosses, but the one that I formed a genuine friendship with is the one that we will call Jeff. Jeff is a very laid-back, go-with-the-flow type of guy with a great sense of humor. I also should explain that he is single with no children. Not long after I started working with the company, we became friends and he often stops by my desk to chat. It was about a year ago that he stopped by one morning and I immediately knew that he was not himself. He seemed distant and stressed, which is unusual for him. When I questioned what was wrong, he told me that he needed to speak with me about a situation. Of course, I was immediately concerned and I urged him to go on. He explained that a few years ago, long before I even started at the company, another woman began working at the company. She was not in our department, but did work within our company that required her to interact with leadership in our area, including Jeff. From this point on, we will call her Lauren. He explained his interactions with Lauren were not often at all, but she was polite and professional when they did need to speak. He said that she worked for the company for less than a year and then left as she announced that she was getting married and moving. And that was that. He did not encounter her again until a couple of weeks prior when he received a friend request from her on social media. He explained that he didn't think much of it and accepted it as he was Facebook friends with many colleagues both past and present. She then messaged him later on after accepting the request. He said that he chatted back with her initially as she seemed to just want to catch up. He learned that she had divorced and wanted to move back to our town. The conversation carried on as normal until she asked if he would join her for dinner when she came back to town to visit in a couple of days. And Jeff explained that he politely declined her offer, and at first, she took it well. But then, it all went downhill from there. He stopped responding shortly after declining the dinner invitation, and within a few hours, he received erratic and insulting messages from her. Everything from calling him a wimpy bitch to saying that she was the best thing that he could hope for, and he blew any chance with her now. He did let me read some of these messages myself right then. He honestly felt like these were drunk texts, but still bothered him, and then he blocked her. He figured that was the end of it. But how very wrong he was. She then began emailing both his personal and work email, pleading for another chance, saying that she was drunk and didn't mean it, saying that she needed to see him and so on. I would get to read a lot of these myself when I would later be asked to print these off for him for evidence. The reason he was telling me about this that particular day was because he had received a message request from Lauren's sister saying that she needed to talk to him about Lauren and that it was urgent. He accepted and responded to who we will call Beth. Beth told him something that had snapped in Lauren when she went through her divorce, and she became fixated on a man that she called Jeff. Beth explained that she had tried to talk some sense into Lauren when everything fizzled out with the initial conversation with Jeff. But Lauren wasn't having it. Lauren told Beth that he was her soulmate and that she was going after him. All of this led to Beth explaining that Lauren had flown into our town and was staying at a hotel close to our company and was coming to see him at work. Jeff said that he had found out what Beth said to be true when he came in and found Lauren standing outside his office. She immediately ran to him when he saw him and then pulled him into an awkward hug. Jeff said that he smelled the alcohol on her and he immediately pulled away. She explained that she was here to get her old job back and needed to see him. She also brought him gifts that included gift cards, snacks, and a picture of herself. Jeff refused these gifts, but she became more forceful and insisted he keep them. Jeff got away from her shortly after saying that he had a meeting. He then went to HR to explain the situation and how he absolutely did not want her to be employed there again. He provided me with a copy of the picture she left for him and said that if I saw her anywhere around the company property, to notify security. Beth later sent Jeff a picture of Lauren dressed as a man that Lauren had sent to her, saying, "I'm wearing a disguise so I can watch him without him knowing it's me." Again, this was nearly a year ago. Things only escalated. Lauren made multiple trips back to our town, but would try to catch Jeff in the parking lot. He would find multiple letters on his vehicle from her. Sometimes they made no sense. She once left him 2 letters that said the exact same things, word for word, but one was in cursive and the other one was in print. Jeff blocked numerous email accounts only for her to make new ones, and she professed her love for him, begging him to want her. She stated that she made him her beneficiary if anything was to happen to her. She even sent emails that were clearly from her, but claimed to be other men that wanted her and needed him to release her so that she could love them instead. Again, I got to read all of this when we were printing for evidence. She eventually got his personal cell phone number somehow and began calling and texting him constantly. He would block the numbers, only for new ones to come through. This eventually ended up in court, and a protective order was granted. This did bring things to a halt for a while. Jeff was finally himself once this occurred, as he had become a shell of himself, and I really felt horrible for him. Well, that was until this week. On Monday morning, Jeff came by my desk and I could tell right away that he was not happy. And before I could say a word, he demanded to know who placed all those letters on his desk. I was confused, as I had no clue what he was talking about. I said as much, and he explained that there was a thick stack of letters and handmade Valentine cards on his desk from Lauren. We later found out that they had been stuffed under his door, and the housekeeper found them scattered on his office floor when she went to clean it. She didn't know what they were, so she just picked them up and neatly placed them on his desk. This was as troubling as it was figuring out how she got in the building in the first place. And shortly after, Jeff returned to his office to finish up some things before taking the letters to the police station. I was working away at my desk when I received a call from Jeff. Upon answering, I heard an almost panicked Jeff saying, "She's here!" He explained that he got a knock at his office door and opened it to find her on the other side grinning at him. He said that he told her that he was calling the police and slammed the door in her face and locked it. He called the police and then called me to inform me that she had been there and the police were on the way. I foolishly assumed that she'd bailed after he told him that he was calling the cops. I got up from my desk and headed down the hall to Jeff's office to check on him and wait on the police with him. But I stopped dead in my tracks when I saw her. She was sitting on the floor outside of his office door, humming to herself. And then she slowly turned her head to look at me. I can't explain the knot that formed in my stomach as our eyes locked. She looked a lot like the picture Jeff had previously given me, but her eyes were different. They were dark. There wasn't that lively spark that you often see in people's eyes. It was like they were hollow, void of any normalcy. Her lips slightly twitched up to a smile, and she then slowly turned her head back towards Jeff's door, and she resumed humming. I booked it. I absolutely darted back to my desk, and thankfully, the police arrived shortly after. She didn't put up a fight. She calmly allowed them to arrest her, and then walked away willingly with them, still humming, and they informed us after. She is still in jail for violating the protective order. Jeff and myself are both still very shaken by the experience, and I will never forget that look or her eyes, staring into an abyss of true insanity. So I grew up in a very small town next to the Mexico border in America. My family had taught me about being cautious of human traffickers and drug traffickers in our area because of the recent cases. Not quite sure if that's important to the story, but it definitely helped with how I acted. My best friend and I, who were both 14 at that time and in high school, decided to take a walk in a nearby park. It was a very popular park, and it was a walking distance from both of our houses, so off we went. As we were walking around and talking, a grown man who was about in his 40s came up to us. He said that he was new in town and didn't know where anything was. My friend and I gave each other a look of slight nervousness, but we kept our cool. We didn't engage him much in the conversation, but we could tell that it was getting more and more uncomfortable. He asked if we went to the local middle school that was down the street, and I said we were high schoolers, but didn't mention which one. It already bothered me that a grown man wanted to talk to who he thought were middle school kids. Then I noticed something and gave my friend a signal with my eyes. There was another man behind us, also following us. I wouldn't have even noticed him if the guy talking to us didn't give the guy a smile when I confirmed that we were underaged. This man kept his head down when I looked back. He wore a hat, seeming to hide his face. And as we walked around the park, the first guy kept asking questions, and the second guy didn't stray too far and didn't even try to act as though he wasn't following us. This was getting too much for me. The first man's questions were either about our small town or about our lives in the town. Nothing too invasive. Well, until he asked for our phone numbers. This was almost 10 years ago, and even though smartphones were a thing, I had a flip phone, and we were broke teens. My friend claimed that she didn't have a phone. I can't remember if this was true or not, but I do remember knowing that I couldn't pull the same sentence due to being on my phone fiddling with it. It's a flip phone, so there isn't much to do on it in the first place. So I just admitted that I'd rather not give out my number. He then started telling me things like, come on, why not? You girls can show me around town." And things like that. I just explained that I had limited texts and minutes, so I don't give out my number easily. This is when I noticed how dark it was getting outside. His questions kept us stuck in the park till dark because we were too scared to try to walk home and out of a fairly popular park where there were other people who we could run to if worse comes to worse. These guys were much bigger than us, and we didn't find anyone we knew. I knew that we couldn't keep delaying, so I decided to just bite the bullet. I told him that it was getting too dark and we had to start heading home. Then, directed my friend towards the edge of the park to our houses. But that didn't stop him. He followed after saying that he could drive us home and that we wouldn't have to walk. I lied, and I claimed that it was just down the block. It was about 5 very long blocks away, and Google says it's a 20-minute walk. He claimed that he wouldn't feel right just letting 2 young girls walk home alone. And then he pointed at a nearby parking lot saying, "Look, my car's not too far. Let me drive you home." At this moment, I noticed the second man following us was suddenly only 2 or 3 steps behind us instead of the distance that he was at. Nope. I am not dealing with this. I said it was faster if we just walked, then quickly said bye and nice to meet you, and then sped off. My mom always taught me to be polite, and looking back, I wish she hadn't. Ladies, don't be polite to men that creep you out. I was too young, but if this happened now, I wouldn't have been so polite. My friend and I speed walk across the street, only to see both men hurry to the parking lot. I didn't think much about them hurrying away, only feeling a rush of relief that they weren't following us anymore. The relief, however, was short-lived. We were on the left side of the road, and while walking, we noticed the van turn onto the street on the right side of the road, and it was freaking them. They were obviously on the opposite side of the road, but they were hardcore staring at us as they drove by, only to do a sharp turn at the end of the block. And feeling a bit wary, we decided to cross the street just in case. And it was the right decision. They came right back to the road, and luckily this time, we were on the right side of the street and they were on the left side. Luckily, these streets were pretty big, so they couldn't just drive on the opposite side. There were more stairs as they drove past, only to do another sharp turn at the end of the block. There was nothing for us to do in the middle of this long block except to hide and hope for the best. We ducked behind a car parked in someone's driveway and waited. An old lady spotted us and seemed suspicious, but didn't say a word. She watched the street as well, and there went by the same van. We couldn't see them at our angle, but we knew that it was the van. The van drove by much, much slower. We felt like it was taking forever for them to clear out the block. "They left. You should be good," said the old lady. We thanked her, and then we ran towards where we lived. She lived closer than me, so after I made sure that she was home, I then ran all the way to my house nonstop. I kept my eye on the street for vans, but they either lost us or gave up. I still never been more scared than that night, running 2 blocks home at night by myself. I want to preface this by saying that while I don't live in the safest neighborhood, I have lived here all my life without feeling unsafe. Neighborhoods like mine, which are impoverished and predominantly minority, are often labeled as dangerous, but they foster a strong sense of community among all the residents. One night, I was walking home after leaving my apartment to buy something at a nearby store. I live in a city that never sleeps, and it was only around 10 or 11 p.m., so it was just a regular early night of me going to the deli to get snacks. There was nothing eerie or weird or dangerous about it. And as I entered my apartment building, a man hurried to catch the door before it closed behind me. It's common for people, including myself, to forget their keys or need to use the intercom to enter. So, I held the door for him despite not recognizing him and sensing that he was intoxicated. My building has 2 sides, and I assumed that he lived on the other side since he wasn't a familiar face to me. Like I said, I have lived here all my life and I know most of my neighbors. As I walked into the lobby, there was another boy waiting for the elevator, and thinking back, I don't believe I recognized him either. When the elevator arrived, the boy and I walked in, and at the last minute, the man grabbed the door to join us as it was closing. It was then that I noticed the man had been lingering off to the side of the lobby, waiting for the elevator too, and I began feeling uneasy. Because the man had entered at the last moment, and he was able to see the elevator floor button that I pressed. His finger hovered over the button of the floor that I had just pressed, as if he was also going to press that one, until he noticed that it was already pressed. I immediately felt my stomach drop, as I definitely knew that he was not someone who lived on my floor. Thankfully, the other boy in the elevator was going to a floor higher than mine. When we reached my floor, the man exited the elevator and held the door open, expecting me to exit after him. I hesitated, silently staring at him without moving. Something inside me urged me to stay in the elevator. And once he realized that I wasn't getting out, he let the door shut and I immediately heard his footsteps going straight down the stairs to exit the building. I stared at the boy, wondering if I should say something, worried that he would think that I was weird for staying on the elevator even though we passed my floor. I didn't say anything. We reached his floor, and he silently got off, and I took the elevator back down to my floor. I went in my apartment, and then I locked all my doors. What scares me the most about this is that my parents were out of the country, so if that creepy man would have forced his way into my apartment, I would have been alone. I don't know if he was really after me or if I made the whole thing up in my head, but I have never had a feeling of intuition or uneasiness like that before. And looking back, I wonder if that boy was a guardian angel. A few years ago, my girlfriend, me, and 4 of our friends rented a cabin for a few days during spring break. We just wanted a place where we could all chill and do whatever. The only determined plan we did make was for all of us to go rock climbing together. The cabin was bigger than expected too. It had 3 bedrooms, one with a master bath, and then another separate bathroom, which was great. The living room was spacious enough for all of us to watch a movie in, and the kitchen was big enough for one of my friends to cook a full-course meal. He was going to a culinary school at that time, so he was always willing to cook for someone, and we were always willing to be the guinea pigs. The kitchen had a door to the back covered porch, which then led out to an open field with a big fire pit and trees that lined the back of it. It was perfect, especially for the price. And if it wasn't obvious, there were 3 couples and we all drove separate cars and met there. We all chipped in and split the cost of our food, drinks, and entertainment, and legitimately all worked out really well. I think the worst part that we had experienced was Mike and Jess missing a turn and having to guide them backwards. Well, that was until the second night. The night had a slight chill to it, but nothing a bonfire couldn't fix. So we went to start a fire and realized that none of us brought lighter fluid, so we started looking around the cabin for a lighter or matches or anything. We finally found a lighter that barely worked in the bathroom and was able to get our fire started. We all grabbed some drinks and sat by the fire, just talking and screwing off, when I noticed Leslie staring off. I nudged my girlfriend Madison to look at her, and then she called her out. That's when Leslie pointed out a figure standing by the trees. Isaiah, being the guy that's not afraid of anything, called him out, asking if he wanted to join us, or if he at least had a lighter. After we all sat there snickering, we watched as he slowly turned and walked towards the driveway and then down the hill until we couldn't see him anymore. This place was like a campground but with cabins, so we weren't really in the middle of nowhere. So at first, we just assumed that it was someone at a neighboring cabin watching us, possibly mad about us being outside, possibly being loud, you know? That was actually a tame night, but some people are pretty whiny like that, so we decided to just take it back inside since the fire was weak anyways. And the rest of the night was just us playing a game inside, and it went just fine. The next day was our rock climbing and hiking day. We all piled into Jess's Jeep, and then we headed to the place. And the event went great, and we were all having a lot of fun. We ended up coming across a lake at the bottom of a small cliff, and being the dumb young people we were, we all made bets and dared Isaiah to jump into the lake from the top of the overhang. And like I said, It wasn't that high up, and swimming was permitted in that lake, so it wasn't that big of a deal. It was more so just his girlfriend that didn't want him to do it. But as dumb guys do, he did it anyway. And once we all got in, I just enjoyed floating on the water and people watching. When I noticed someone who stood out. It was a guy standing over by the cliffside that Isaiah jumped from. But the reason he stood out was because of his choice of clothing. While everyone else around us was in hiking garb, some bathing suits or even just shorts and a t-shirt, this guy was in black dress pants, a black suit jacket, and a black hat like a fedora style. He had the hat on pretty low, however, so I couldn't see his face. Yet, I felt his gaze. He was definitely staring in our direction, and this time, I said out loud to everyone, "Are we being stared at?" This caused everyone to look in the same direction and notice this guy too. We were all just there having a staring contest and talking amongst ourselves as to why someone would possibly be here dressed like that. And not long after, Isaiah again shouted out to the guy, which caused some of the other people nearby to look around. I assume others noticed the oddity as they began staring, talking and pointing, which then caused the guy to turn around and walk straight back behind the ledge. Until he was gone. We all thought this was weird, but I, at least, didn't connect it to our previous night's experience at this point. I just thought that it was someone being weird. We ended up leaving shortly after to get stuff for dinner, as well as some lighter fluid, just to be prepared for our next fire. After dinner and freshening up, we tried to have a bonfire again. This time, it went a lot better, and we had loosened up and were having a blast. We were talking and teasing. The girls were even pushing their limits and making a fool of themselves. It was genuinely a great time for us. Well, that was until Leslie was again caught staring into the trees. That's when we all turned to look and saw the same guy. This form was the same, but with a giant flashlight Mike bought this time, we could shine the light right on him. He was wearing the same pants and suit, jacket, and hat. And when the light hit him, he didn't really budge though. He leaned his head down some, probably to block out some of the light, but otherwise, he didn't do anything else. Isaiah again yelled at this guy, but it was a bit more threatening. I don't really blame him though. The girls were getting pretty nervous, and this guy had obviously been following or watching us. But this time, after a lot of shouting, I think most of us started feeling uncomfortable with the situation, and we all agreed to go inside. Once in, Madison actually called the cabin management office and told them that someone was being creepy around our cabin and said that they would send someone out to take a look. The rest of the night wasn't as eventful, as the staring guy kind of made us sober up some, but we did watch another movie until some of us started getting drowsy. Leslie and Isaiah went to their room. Madison went to bed before the second movie ended, and I followed her after it was over, leaving Mike and Jess in the living room. Mike was already snoring, so I assumed they weren't going anywhere. I don't know the exact time, but I know that it wasn't more than an hour or so after I went to bed that I woke up to a piercing scream. Madison had been startled awake too, and after confirming that it wasn't her, I ran out of the room to find out what the hell had happened. I found Jess screaming in the living room. The front door was wide open, and Mike was gone. She then explained that she woke up to a scratching sound, and when she looked at the window behind the couch they were on, she saw someone trying to open it or at least standing at it. She then said that Mike ran out of the door to catch the guy. Isaiah and I ran out after him, but found him shouting towards the trees. When we caught up to him, he said that he had caught up to the guy, knocked his hat off, but the guy fought back with pepper spray or something to that sort. He said something hit his face, which made his eyes burn, and it was hard to breathe. We brought him back to the cabin, and this time, we called the cops and the office people. This time, Madison was not as nice. Police actually showed up pretty quickly and then took our report. And then they looked around the cabins. They even went to a couple nearby and questioned those people too. They, of course, never found the guy or his hat. This guy most likely was brazen enough to go back and get it and still miss the cops. Jess took Mike to the hospital and Madison agreed to go with her while the rest of us stayed behind. We never saw the guy again that night, but none of us went back to sleep either. After a few hours, the others came back and confirmed that it was just some sort of pepper spray, so he was going to be alright, but the trip had already been ruined. Jess, Leslie, and Mike were definitely not interested in staying the rest of the trip. No one could blame them either. And after some talking, we ended up packing up all of our stuff that night, and the other 4 took off. Madison and I were pretty shaken up too, but we still had this book for one more night, and she really wanted to give the front desk people a piece of her mind. I guess they didn't seem too concerned about the situation when she first called, and yeah, they probably should have been, because it was their property and that could have been damaged. So we put all of our belongings in the bedroom, locked the door, and tried our best to sleep there. The next morning was exhausting as we didn't really sleep much. Management called us and apologized and said that they could give a partial refund, but they did offer to move us to a different cabin. After informing our friends, they told us to enjoy, but that they didn't want to go back. They did move us to one that had an indoor hot tub, so that was pretty cool. We didn't have another run-in with the guy, but they also never found him. We still to this day have no idea why he targeted us or what his intentions even were if he were to break in. And the fact that he had pepper spray made me think that he had bad intentions of using it, or at least needing it. We haven't been on a trip with the others since, but we all still hang out and remember that creepy spring break that got ruined for us. This story is 100% true, and it's always creeped me out, and I think about it a lot. About 3 years ago, I was out for a late night walk in a park that was about 2 blocks from where I lived at that time. It was a pretty safe neighborhood, so I often felt comfortable walking around alone during the late night hours. I remember it being around 3:30 in the morning. Don't ask why I was up that late or walking around during that time. Let's just say that I was going through some stuff. But in hindsight, I know it wasn't smart, especially as a young woman. Anyway, I approached the park, which was lined with large bushes. There was also a street next to the park, and on the other side of the street was a large grassy field. Suddenly, I spotted a bald man carrying large objects that were wrapped in black plastic. He had on blue surgical gloves and a long plastic jacket. He seemed to be transporting these bagged items across the street from the park and then into the field. I stopped and I watched for a moment as he began crossing the street again with more bagged items. But he stopped when he saw me, and then he ran towards the bushes. He stuffed the bags into the bushes and then hid in them. I could see him clearly, and the whole situation gave me bad vibes. So I quickly turned around and I started walking back home. I glanced back to make sure that he wasn't following me, and I saw his bald head peering over the bushes, staring at me. I started speed walking, and when I was about a block away, I saw him sprint across the street and hide behind a large tree. Again, all I could see was this bald head peering around the side of a tree, just staring at me. By this point, my heart was racing, but I kept walking quickly. I didn't want to run because I didn't want him to know that I could see him following me. My thought process was, if a lion is stalking you, it's not a good idea to run because they will start chasing you. I just focused on staying calm and getting home safely. Finally, I reached my house and I locked both the front and back doors, and I tried to shake off what had happened and then go to sleep. The next day was completely normal. I decided to walk to the park in the daylight when there were lots of people around, and I checked the bushes to see if he had left anything behind. Nothing. Later that night, I sat down to watch a movie. I decided not to go on any more late night walks after that incident. Even though nothing happened to me, it was creepy, and I realized that it could have turned into a bad situation. You never know what someone like that is capable of. It definitely seemed like I had caught him doing something suspicious. While I was watching the movie, I then got up to grab a glass of water. My kitchen has a window next to the sink with a view of the backyard, and I always kept the kitchen lights off at night so that I could keep an eye out in the yard without anyone being able to see me. When I looked out into the backyard, to my surprise, I saw him standing in the middle of my yard, just staring at my house. I knew it was him because even in the dark, I could make out his pale bald head. I immediately cracked open the window and yelled, "Hey!" And he took off running, leaving the gate to my fence wide open. Since then, I never saw the man again. I still have no idea what he was doing that night or what his intentions were in following me home and also stalking my house. But I don't think I want to know. Hey everyone, this is your creepy sister. Thank you so much for watching the video. I do hope you enjoyed it. Also, don't forget to leave a like and a comment. It really helps the channel out. A big shout out to both my channel members and Patreon members. Thank you so much for taking your support to the next level. You guys are great. And again, to everyone, stay scared because your fear feeds me.